let's move on then to our final plenary session. Still one or two more people making their way in, but we'll get started because there's a lot to get through in the next hour and a half or so. We'll have the final plenary session and then straight away a review video of the conference so far, the closing speeches, and then a family photo, which we're going to do here on these steps here, which will be organized by Tracy Novak of the Comms Department, sitting at the back there. So moving on then, safeguarding the sport, empowering the future. We'll look at the very DNA of motorsport and how modern implementations such as hybrid, electric power, autonomous vehicles could actually subvert traditional ideas of what motorsport really is. We'll look at where motorsport's going in this digital age, all the stuff we heard the last couple of days from Roddy Basso and Alex Young, all about the personalization, all about the digitization of our sport, where the opportunities lie there for all of you as ASNs. And there'll be a discussion also in this session centered on social responsibility and how important accessibility and development is to the future of our sport.
We have a lot to get through this morning. So ladies and gentlemen, let's start off by welcoming to the stage Mr. Mehul Kapadia, the Managing Director of Formula One Business of Tata Communications, which has basically ushered in the digital era of Formula One. Thank you, sir.
Mehul, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to Manila. Thank you for making the journey. We're based in London,
yes,
but obviously working for Tata Communications, one of the obviously biggest companies in India. And I mean, we've seen so much in the last couple of days about the whole way that the world is going more digital. Maybe before we get into our discussion, we should look at a video of what basically you guys have been up to in Formula One since 2012. Let's roll the video, please. Well, quite a journey, clearly. I mean, you started with a clean sheet of paper in 2012 and have achieved all that. Give us an overview, really, of what that means in practical terms. It's all beautiful and technical. It's clearly putting the fan at the center of everything, which is all that Chase and his team are building on. But in practical terms, what does it actually mean, what you've been doing?
Yeah. So good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me here. I think the journey of 6 years has been clearly the journey of digital transformation with Formula One. And we heard some interesting things yesterday in terms of what's happening in terms of big data, right? And big data, which is not just about the drivers and the car, but a lot of action which is happening out there. And the younger generation of fans, and Rodi presented some great data, Rupert presented some excellent data yesterday in terms of what's happening with the fans as well. That generation, the way they are consuming content, is what we've tried to attempt to do through the last 6 years with Formula One. So preparing the foundation for high quality transmission through 4K, Ultra HD, doing things like the live OTT, ensuring that in motorsport, where in 2 seconds the world can change, how do you synchronize all the content which has been seen across the world? So in some sense, to what Graham was saying yesterday about delivery mechanisms, that's what we've attempted to put in place for Formula One.
And when we're talking about OTT, I mean, this is over-the-top television. So basically, a lot of motorsport series have relied on having a relationship with a broadcaster that will carry their racing series. But essentially, what you're doing here is putting in place the infrastructure so that motorsport series can just go direct to the consumer in a future world. So anybody who's interested in cross-country rallying, for example, or regional Formula 3 or whatever, it's potentially direct to the consumer in a digital way, not having to get involved in any way or shape or form with a conventional TV company.
Absolutely. And in some sense, that's where the opportunity lies, right? The diversity of motorsports that we have, and when I look at what's happening in different geographies with different ASNs, the amount of content generated is not really reaching the customers or the fans, right? And having this ability to take personalized experiences to different geographies and different languages, whether it's kilometers and miles or even simple things like that, is where this OTT platforms can help. And the scalability of these are that you can do it at a global level, you can do it at a regional level, you could do it just for your geography, or you could do it for your diaspora, which is in other parts of the world. So you're really breaking down the barriers of geographies, and in some sense, I don't want to say bypassing the broadcasters, but being able to reach your customers directly.
And monetize it as well. I mean, sometimes some race series have to give the rights to broadcast because they want the eyeballs on the coverage, because obviously the value comes to the sponsors that way. Yeah. But in this situation, you could obviously put the digital, through the digital signal, you can have a direct relationship and then monetize that and also link it in with social media as a promotional tool as well. So one sort of digital wraparound, if you like.
Absolutely, absolutely. A full digital wrap around it and the ability to reach directly. So,
you mentioned the word personalization. There are two sides to personalization, aren't there? One is the personal experience of the viewer. We saw you had there, one of your proof of concepts was the viewer could actually control a 360 camera at the racetrack, or look at a 360 camera view at the racetrack in Singapore. So how far does that go? But also, Alex Young talked about the need for driver heroes to be built up in regions. How much can the digital world help with building up those personalities?
Yeah, I think that 360-degree trial that we did was really empowering, and it's going with the theme of the conference this time, empowering the future fan, right? Because they may want to immerse with a particular driver, they may want to immerse with a particular team, they may want certain sections of the racetrack that they want to look at. And having that ability to do that really comes through with that kind of technology. If you connect it back to the younger generation, and I know while we focus on people who are currently our fans, it's the next 5 years that will determine the future of the sport, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at that segment, they're all about micro experiences, right? Felipe was talking about his son yesterday and how he's immersed into his mobile phone and iPad. And if you think of all our children and how they are going to consume, they want their independent experiences. They want to dip in, dip out when they want. They want it on their terms at their time. And that's where things like 360-degree and OTT and delivering it directly is going to bring in a lot of value.
Let's talk about some of the, I mean, obviously you've come into the motorsport. You were a fan before, I believe.
Big fan.
Big fan of Formula One. Who was your favorite driver when you were growing up?
Senna.
Senna.
It was
all about Senna. So it helps that you were passionate about the sport, and then this must have been a dream role for you then to...
Absolutely. Something that I didn't plan for, but really having immersed in it, it's been a great journey.
Well, that's cool. But you've obviously observed all that's going on and the conversations we've been having here the last couple of days about the way the wider motorsports ecosystem is developing, the shift to hybrid, the increasing electrification, and obviously esports as well, which we've heard a lot about. What interests you in the direction? Speaking to this audience, these are the people that put the races on, they put the rallies on. What are you seeing that's going to move their world?
Yeah. I would like to kind of connect the dots with what's happening in the business world outside of motorsports as well, right? At the end of it, we in motorsport also depend on the success of the other businesses, the sponsors that will come in, the funding that will come in through them for us to grow. And if I look at it, the digital transformation journeys are not just about the fan experiences, which we have spoken a lot about, but also how we can make our entire journey efficient. Right? So if you look at the way teams are operating and how can they cut costs, so costs should not be just about how they are building the car, but costs are also about how they're running their overall operations. So can you do things remotely? If you look at broadcasters as well, how much of their content can they actually do remotely and hence save in terms of people going to the racetracks to create stuff? And if we take a lot of those experiences and bring it back into how kind of ASNs would also want to run their operations within their geographies to attract more talent to come in, more talent to be able to understand the various programs. So we heard some interesting programs yesterday about what's happening in go-karting, and how do you make it easily available to your entire base of fans? And that's where a lot of these digital technologies could actually help in that as well.
And a final word, you're obviously rolling out a similar program now that you just started working in MotoGP. So tell us a little bit about how that series and maybe what you could do with other series is evolving.
So the first of the thing was that because of our work that we did with F1 over 4 or 5 years, MotoGP, we could do it in 2 years.
Right.
So that's something that for the other motor series that we have, we can cut short the cycle time. And it's not just about us, but about what can happen in the industry that can really help in that process.
Fantastic. Well, for the moment, thank you very much, Mehul Kapadia from Tata. We'll hear some more from you on the panel. And Paula, let's introduce the panel.
So we are discussing, of course, ladies and gentlemen, safeguarding the sport, empowering the future. So I'd like to welcome to the stage the Global Motorsport Director of Nissan, Mr. Michael Carcamo, as well as Burkhard Gerschel, the President, FIA Electric and New Energy Championship Commission. Thank you, gentlemen.
Well, welcome all. Welcome, Burkhard. Welcome, Michael. Obviously, we're just touching on it there. It's clear that the automotive industry is pivoting towards electrification. Is it a given that motor racing has to follow suit? Burkhard.
I think so, because the technology and the industry is developing in this direction, and we see electrification everywhere. And if you see the regulations concerning particulates, fuel consumption, NOx, and under the regulation of real driving conditions, you cannot go without electrification. So it's going straightly forward.
Could you just move your microphone up a little bit, just so we can hear you a little bit more? There you go. Okay. Perfect. Thank you very much. Sorry, you finished? Or?
No, it's okay. Next
question.
Okay,
Michael, your view.
I would absolutely agree. I think the motorsports and the automotive industry a bit go hand in hand, and for Nissan, that's part of our vision about making cars more autonomous, more electrification, and delivering that experience in a cohesive way, which for us is expressed in what we call Nissan Intelligent Mobility, which is really about an ecosystem around mobility, and EV is really making that happen.
And Mehul, you're not directly involved in this, but obviously as an observer and a technologist, what are your thoughts?
I think it's good that it's becoming more and more relevant to the future generations, right? And what's happening with electrification of cars, and autonomous cars as they come in, it's going to help ensure that the way people want to consume it, they can consume it. We've got used to it on everything, right? Everything is on our terms, and having autonomous cars is going to help us do that. And the more motorsports embraces it, it'll become that much more relevant. Just a note there, however, that we should ensure that what we like about motorsports is today the adrenaline, the thing that somebody could do some stuff which we can't do, and that spirit of motorsport should continue, because that's going to bring us the joy that it brings today.
Well, Michael, you already touched, an overview of just the relevance and the importance you feel for your company in terms of electrification. But Nissan is throwing an awful lot of resources in this area. Can you delineate maybe more of what you're doing and why you're doing so much?
Sure. I think it's important to remember that while it seems like we're putting a lot of resources in today, we've actually been doing it for quite a while. Nissan has been involved in innovating alternative sources of power for more than 70 years. For even longer than that, but the first electric vehicle that Nissan produced through the Tama engineers was in 1947. Our first concept vehicle in Tokyo Motor Show in 1970. And then the first mass-produced electric vehicle in 2010 with the Nissan Leaf. This year, in September, we launched the second generation Nissan Leaf, which is the best-selling EV in the world, over 300,000 units. So we're really demonstrating that it's possible to make mass electric vehicles possible. And we think that that's why innovation's about, and that's what Nissan is excited doing.
Very much so, done it for so long. Let's talk about this issue of Cristiana Figueres on the Formula E Advisory Board, challenging the championship to put the combustion engine into a museum ASAP. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, Nissan does have a beautiful museum, heritage museum in Zama, but I wouldn't say, as Mehul mentioned, I don't think it's about, it's not about good or bad, it's not about one dying or not, it's really about the change that's happening. And transportation and mobility is changing and will continue to change. And what we have to remember is a bit more about the goal and the objective. For us, it's about zero emissions for sustainability and the environment, but also about zero fatalities, because we really shouldn't accept the fact that any human has to die in an automobile. So it's really about that change that's occurring, and we want to be a pioneer in that space.
Yeah. That's a good point, isn't it? We don't need to have just one. We can have both of them running together in tandem and just move forward as a whole. Let's talk about Formula E. You're coming into the series in place of Renault, and of course the majority of this field are now manufacturers. What would you say, Michael, competing in Formula One does...
Formula E.
In Formula E, I'm sorry. I meant to say E, you know I did. What does that give you as a manufacturer?
Well, first of all, we're really excited to be in Formula E because for us, again, it's a natural progression from the road to the track. Being a sales leader on the road, we want to have the opportunity to demonstrate that on a racetrack. And with all the new manufacturers coming, we know that it's going to be a highly competitive series. But just like Formula One or any other kind of motorsports, racing allows high-speed development. It allows cycle times which are just not possible in a normal production environment. And we're not just talking about the actual technology that we see, the hardware and the software, but also the people. So I think that's also very exciting. And the fact that, as mentioned yesterday, we're bringing it to the people in racing in city centers is something that Formula E has, which is unique as compared to any other form. So you put that together, you talk about mobility, transportation, racing, downtown city centers. To me, it sounds like a good show.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Michael. Burkhard, many people will know you've been around motorsport for a long time, but they'll know you as the guy who was on the board at BMW. You wrote the checks for the Formula One program, which, of course...
big ones.
Big checks. Very, very big checks indeed. And, of course, now you're on the FIA Electric and New Energy Championship Commission. Maybe just give us a quick overview of the work you're doing.
Okay, what we are doing in our commission is that we are introducing the new technologies for future energies in motorsports. That's the main target. And as we discussed just now, we are talking about electrification everywhere. And I explained that's a main issue, main development issue for the automotive industry. And for example, Formula E was an outcome of our activities, and now we are initiated further steps. It's like, let me say, e-rallycross or e-karting, what we did. But we're not only looking for so serious, we are looking also for the technology roadmap which is coming on for the future years. And we did it, for example, also for Formula E. We have a clear roadmap how to go and how to go forward and which kind of technology which we would apply. It's batteries, it's charging systems, it's semiconductors and everything like that. And so that's introducing that's the main target what we are doing. But might be there are future issues, and we are thinking about is fuel cell racing a further point to come? When should it come? When it is mature to go into motorsports and so on. So that's what we are thinking about in our commission.
Interesting, very interesting. Now, we've heard, obviously, very exciting news about the Youth Olympics and the opportunity for a demo there involving e-karts, electric karts. Now, I know electric karting is something that you personally are pretty excited about. You've been pretty involved in it. Should we check out the video first and then have a chat about it?
Yes, you should show us the video first, and then I would talk about it a little bit. Yes.
Let's roll that video then, please.
Good evening, everybody, here from the sunny Wackersdorf racetrack in good old Germany. My name is Manuel Adam, and I'm General Manager from the RigTech GmbH, a subsidiary company of BAP Rotax GmbH. Today we have the first race weekend of the DEKM, the first electric karting championship in the world. We are proud to provide our high-performing racing e-kart, the Rotax Thunder, with a lot of performance in terms of top speed. We have 130 kilometers per hour top speed, ultimate acceleration, and for sure, last but not least, our boost button, which really is something you need to try. I wish all the drivers here in the paddock, the 18 drivers, all the best. It will be a nice racing championship and for sure a lot of fun.
Hello, my name is Lauren Klevert. I'm 15 years old and I made the first position in the qualifying of the DEKM. I'm very happy to take part at the worldwide first electric karting series in Wackersdorf, and it's a pleasure to drive in the DEKM for me. The chassis felt very good. I was very happy with the engine and yeah, the chassis feeling at all. And I also think we can make a good place in the races, and I think it's possible to stay under the top two or even win everything.
Okay, this young kid is very proud about. And the main point, the main issue is that we did it with a ASN, with a DMSP in Germany, and you see the target, it's a perfect series to go to the different ASNs worldwide, and we have been, or DMSP has been supported by Porsche, which was a very interesting approach, that they want to go to the young drivers and do it with electrical powertrains and everything like that. And so the issue is we have 5 races per season and with 9 heats per race. And at the end, there's an award from Porsche coming to support the whole issue. And so it's only one example to go around the world with such kind of a series for the different ASN, and it's a very cheap issue. And some data about the car, but they are not so important because an electrical car is behaving totally different than an internal combustion engine-driven car because the dynamic behavior is so different. And those young guys have to learn to drive the car, but not only driving the car, but to manage the energy consumption and recuperation and everything like that. So that's a very good education for the future.
What excites me about this as well is the fact that, sorry, there's your calendar, but what excites me about this is we talked about bringing the electric karts into city centres as touch points for fans. You know, you have a Formula One Grand Prix in Melbourne, for example. It's very exciting. Lewis Hamilton's in town. The kids will be going, how do I get into this? But if you have electric karts set up in car parks and gymkhanas and slaloms and stuff happening in parallel with those sort of things, all of a sudden you're giving that initial spark, that opportunity for kids to find racing and motorsport.
Okay, I think we can use this kind of events as an additional event to different others. Might be it's for Formula One, or it's an event if you are racing with Formula E or everything else. But you can use tracks, and as you have seen yesterday afternoon, I think, a parking lot to make gymkhana, to make slalom, and make everything like that, because you don't have emissions and everything. You don't have much noise. So it's open for everything to bring young people into the motorsport. It's cheap, and so everybody can afford it to step in. So that's for us to bring young guys to the new technologies and young girls to the new technologies and to come to motorsport.
I should remind everybody that we've got e-karts set up this afternoon, and I believe Felipe Massa is going to set a benchmark time, and you can have a go. There's a kart gymkhana, electric kart gymkhana set up 2 o'clock till 4 o'clock this afternoon. And you can see if you can beat Felipe Massa.
You're doing it, aren't you, James?
Well, no, I think I might be watching television at that point. I don't think I'm going to beat Felipe Massa, not with our relative body weights. Let's put it that way.
And it's too hot for you.
And we are in strong contact with Michel Mouton to bring young girls into such kind of racing series. That's our intention.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you very much, Burkhard.
Mehul, let's just go back to you, and it's something you touched on with James and the importance and just how vital the next 5 years is. So you're a technologist working at the very heart of motorsport. What do you think about these changes in this area? Are they happening fast enough? Are we already seeing an impact on the sport? Is it effective?
Yep, so it can always be faster, right? I mean, the change that we do, the pace that we need to keep up with the cycle times outside, but it's really progressive, a lot of the things which are happening. And interestingly, if you look at even the safety glove that we saw in the morning, right, and the data coming from it, how interesting a fan experience can become if that were to go out, right? And that's where the technology that we are using to reach out to people on social and getting embraced by motorsport into what they're doing at the core is something that can really help spark the future.
See, technology is a funny thing because some people are just innately able to get a grasp of things, and then some fans, it kind of goes right over their heads. How do you find the balance for this? How do you maintain your fans and keep advancing with technology at the same time?
That's where I think things like esports are making it that much more easier for fans to consume and understand, right? That entire format where it's not just about the data, but somebody coming in, commentating about it in their language is helping them consume it that much better. So probably that's the direction to head in.
Would you say there's a correlation, Mehul, between a techie guy who likes motorsport more than a person that's not techie?
Wrong question for me because I'm a techie guy who loves motorsport. No, I think the nuances, if you understand the nuances better, you of course appreciate that better. So, yes.
Let's just throw it up quickly for a discussion before we move on to our final part of this. First of all, you mentioned fuel cell. Anything going on with Nissan on fuel cell? Your thoughts on whether that's a possible racing technology of the future, or are you 100% electric focused?
No, I would say that, again, Nissan's been working on fuel cells for probably 20 years. We've had vehicles running, so I think alternative sources are important to study, and again, change will happen, whether it's EV or fuel cells or the next. We just need to be prepared to accept that change and keep rolling with it, because again, the passion is the motorsport, so what the source is, I think, won't matter, as long as it's fun and exciting.
Well, you're leading the commission. Do you believe in fuel cell? Can it be integrated into motorsport, whatever it may do in the mobility space?
I see an opportunity if we are looking for long-distance racing. And so it's covered by fast charging, might be charging is not fast enough at the end, could happen. And if we are stepping over to zero emissions in motorsport also for 24 hours racing or something like that, then a fuel cell, in my opinion, can become an interesting issue. And so it's future technology, industry is working on it, and why not? Yeah?
And one other thought, obviously we see robo-race, there's the whole question of the autonomous future, the AI, etc. Do you think there's any place for autonomous in racing? Do you see a future for that, Michael?
I think it's too distinct. I think as defined with FIA and most of us probably in this room, motorsports has to remain a driver with a vehicle. I think the autonomous side of racing is something else, and it will continue to evolve. But I think everyone in this room, I hope, and the future, it's about driving. It's about driving the car. I think that's what excites us.
And actually, what we've heard as well about esports opens up the funnel massively, because the skill level of driving those things, they're putting in 6-7 hours a day of practice, which is more than most real drivers can do. So you see the driver still and always at the heart of what this sport is about.
Absolutely. I think the human difference to what happens is what makes it special. So I completely agree with Michael that that's.
And a final word on this from Professor Gerschel?
I see an opportunity, not really in racing, and in our commission we are supporting e-regularity cup. It's an FIA cup. And so we can, in my opinion, we are evaluating not only the timing, but energy consumption, but to integrate autonomy in this kind of a regularity event. That could be an opportunity to drive it, not for pure racing. I'm with you, it's a driver's issue. But in this kind, we can find a solution for that.
Fascinating discussion, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, let's continue then by calling up our next group of panelists. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We're now moving on to something I think that really will touch all of us, the social responsibility in tandem with motorsport. So let me please invite to the stage now Natalie McGloin, the president of the FIA Disability and Accessibility Commission. Graham Stoker as well, the deputy president for sport, FIA. Thank you, sir. And then we have the IOC representative from the Philippines, gold medal winning equestrian rider Mikey Kahuanga Jaworski.
It's long.
Did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
I was
Thank
rehearsing
you.
it all morning, so I hope so. A warm welcome to all of you. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Natalie, let's kick it off with you. You were recently appointed the president of the FIA Disability and Accessibility Commission. How important is it that motorsport is accessible to all?
It's really important. Cars are naturally accessible to people with disabilities because of the way that controls can be adapted. I think what's really important is that the ASNs do promote and facilitate disabled drivers by putting in place a licensing process that is going to be advice from the Commission to make sure that there is a safe and fair way of assessing whether people with disabilities are eligible for motorsport. Motorsport's the only sport in the world that disabled and non-disabled people can compete on a level playing field. And for me, that's really important because motorsport is the only field where I can be judged on a level playing field because of my skill. Motorsport is also the only sport in the world by which if you have a life-changing accident whilst you are competing in motorsport, whether that's through motorsport or a car accident or another sporting accident, you can go back into motorsport. I used to play wheelchair rugby for GB, and quite a few of my rugby teammates had been able-bodied rugby players that had broken their necks in failed scrums or mistimed tackles. They then went back to playing wheelchair rugby. It's not the same as able-bodied rugby for obvious reasons. If you're a skier and you have a life-changing accident, you can go back to skiing, but it's para-skiing, it's not the Olympics. Motorsport, you go back to doing exactly the same thing. Take Billy Munger, for example. Awful accident last year where he lost both of his legs. Less than a year later, in a more competitive car, he's back doing the same thing, and on his debut, return to the sport, he ends up on the podium. Now that speaks volumes about the character of Billy, but it also speaks volumes about the unique nature of our sport. So I think when we talk about the importance in terms of the Commission, the Disability and Accessibility Commission, I think that there is the importance of creating the licensing process, a back-to-racing scheme for people like Billy, but also an awareness so that we can promote motorsport to disabled people. And I think when we think about people who are competing in motorsport with disabilities, the obvious choices are people like Zanardi, Billy, Frederick Sosette, who have had accidents later on in life. But what I really think we need to do is start promoting motorsport to people who are born with disabilities. Nicholas Hamilton, for example, races, but he didn't see a disabled person in motorsport and be inspired by that. He was naturally inspired by his family history of it. So I'm looking at Michelle Mouton when I'm looking at inspiration for that and what she's doing with the Girls on Track initiative to try and promote motorsport to everyone with disabilities and make sure that people realise that this is for all of us.
It's obviously very personal for you. Motorsport's been a big part of your own personal journey, and we've got a video to show about your story. Let's show that video now.
Spinal Track was first set up as a non-profit company that offered people who drove with hand controls the opportunity to experience track driving.
And as we hit that, we then just open at the wheel, and then looking towards the outside, run it all the way out.
My aim of Spinal Track was to give people the sense of empowerment that I get from racing. It is that sense of freedom and being able to go and take that confidence into other parts of life as well.
It gives you the opportunity to push your boundary and just realise that actually you want to be somebody who's disabled being a racing driver, you can be done.
The whole beauty of motorsport and track days is that disability is completely irrelevant. In 1999, I was involved in a road traffic accident. I broke my neck instantly on the impact and was then cut out of the car by the fire brigade and then spent the best part of 11 months at Pinderfields doing my rehab. I then went back to school and got my A-levels and got on with my life, basically. It was at university that I found wheelchair rugby. It was rugby that really stopped me from being a disabled wheelchair user and turned me into an athlete. And then I started to focus on my strengths instead of my weaknesses. In 2015, I became the first woman with a spinal cord injury to be granted a racing licence in the UK. I currently race cars against able-bodied men. The car signifies quite a big kind of success story for me, if you like. Because a car is how I was injured, and a car is also how I've overcome my injury. It's about making a difference to other people by showing disabled drivers, female drivers, that in racing anything is possible. I think when I'm in my car, I'm me without my injury, because I've overcome it.
We've seen that video now 4 or 5 times. It always gives us goosebumps. It's a beautiful story. And you've already kind of set the scene for us and shown just how much traction you've gained with this. Tell us more recently, Natalie, what's been happening behind the scenes.
I think motorsport, in terms of disability motorsport, has come a long way in the past couple of years, actually. The immersion of charities like Spinal Track and various other ones have been popping up in the UK, at least, quite regularly. I think the creation of the Disability and Accessibility Commission is also a clear marker of progress. I know that Graham, John, Peter Bayer and Gerard Salient have been putting in a lot of work over the past couple of years to make sure that this commission has purpose. And when John offered me the role of president of the commission, he said, this isn't a commission for the sake of a commission. And I hope, John, that you can see that we're making some progress with it. I think also we've seen a lot of progress in terms of the support that disabled drivers have from other drivers in racing at the pinnacle of the sport. For example, Jean-Eric Vergne put on an event last month in Paris at his parents' e-karting venue to promote the commission, to raise some money for Spinal Track, and also to support Billy in his journey back into competitive racing. And I think that kind of support's really important. I think most of the Formula E drivers attended that event. And I think that their support from Billy shows the motorsport community family spirit that we have when something happens, that we all pull together. I also think massive progress has been made in terms of companies that sponsor disabled drivers. Frédéric Sausset, the quad amputee who raced in Le Mans 2016, has put together a filière to create an all-disabled racing team for 2020. And Richard Miller supports that filière. As you can see from the video, Stanley Black & Decker support Spinal Track and what I'm doing. Now, this isn't an opportunity to plug sponsors. This is to demonstrate that motorsport brands that support other drivers are taking disabled drivers seriously. I think they can see value in disabled motor drivers in that, as Jean was saying at the opening of the conference, the athletes involved in motorsport display discipline and commitment, and I think that they're values that companies want to be associated with. Combine that with a disability where the journey is maybe a bit more arduous, and companies can see value in supporting drivers like us. I think the best thing about motorsport is the journey for disabled people to get to that position on the grid is maybe a bit more challenging than non-disabled drivers. But when the lights go out, that journey becomes completely irrelevant, and all that matters is where you finish when the flag goes down.
Absolutely.
I love that. Well, Mikey, we're talking about motorsports and the social responsibility that's really increasing. When it comes to the world of the Olympics, this is very much one of the pinnacles, isn't it? And it's an important part of them. You are the IOC member for the Philippines. How would you describe social responsibility being encapsulated in the Olympics, in your words?
Well, actually, social responsibility as far as the Olympic movement is concerned is one of my favorite topics because we speak of Olympism, which is one of my favorite things. about the Olympics and the Olympic movement because we have the Olympic Games every 2 years. We have the Summer Games and the Winter Games. But I feel that what's more important is what we do in between that. And while I normally don't like to read, I think a lot of people have put so much time and effort into getting wording correctly to describe what Olympism is. For a lot of people, it's a concept, it's a word that gets thrown around, but really for the IOC, Olympism is a philosophy of life, exalting and combining in a balanced whole the qualities of body, will, and mind. Blending sport with culture and education, Olympism seeks to create a way of life based on the joy of effort, the educational value of good example, social responsibility, and respect for universal fundamental ethical principles. So the goal of Olympism is to place sport at the service of humanity, to bring about harmony and development of humankind with a view of promoting a peaceful society, and to be able to use sport in a way where it's not just about the Olympic Games and it's not just about winning medals at the Olympics. It's really what the Olympic Games is all about. And to put this in more tangible ways, we, of course, in the IOC, put the athletes at the center and have projects and programs centering on athlete safeguarding policies, procedures, and we work very closely with partners such as the United Nations to be able to spread the importance of sports as far as health and social benefits of sports. The IOC distributes 90% of our income through Olympic solidarity to help the smaller nations develop sports in their countries, make sport more accessible to all places in the world. We had in Rio in 2016 the refugee Olympic team, which was something that we did to be able to spread hope to people in very dire situations in their lives. And this is what I see as what the IOC does as far as social responsibility outside of the Olympic Games.
There's been a very interesting addition here, the Global Organization of International Sport Federation, the umbrella organization for all Olympic and non-Olympic international sports federations, have added this new clause in that its statutes encourage now and promote women in sport at all levels and in all structures. So how much is this going to shake things up?
A lot, I hope, as a woman. But at the same time, this is an effort that has been ongoing for the IOC. In the IOC commissions, we have at least 42% of women in the different IOC commissions. And just in the last games in Pyeongchang, we had 49% participation of women. So the important part is to be able to have women at different levels in sports, not just as athletes, but also to just be represented on the different bodies and to be part of the decision makers. And as women, we automatically bring something different to the table. And to be able to represent the way we see things, the way we view things, our experiences as women, in contrast to the experience of men, will change things. And I've never seen this as a disadvantage. I've never seen this as taking sport or anything into an undesirable direction, but it's more of the inclusivity of having the view of women there. The IOC in just February of this year, we launched the IOC Women's and Gender Equality Review Project Report, which was a collaboration of the IOC Women in Sport Commission and the Athletes Commission. And this is exactly what they're doing. They have come up with 25 recommendations of how to be able to put women in these different roles as far as the Olympic movement goes.
Mikey, what would you say that motorsport could learn from the Olympics?
Could learn from the Olympics. I think it's more of
the Olympic spirit.
The Olympic spirit. Well, definitely there is a strong relationship because of the social responsibility aspect. I think that that strengthen that relationship comes because we have the concerns of applying what we know about sport and what we do in sport into daily life, not just about, like I said earlier, the Olympic Games themselves. In fact, the IOC and the FIA signed a memorandum of understanding to cooperate on education for road safety. And I think that everybody here is an expert, everybody here is involved in motorsport, and I have to admit that the only thing maybe I have as an athlete in common with motorsports is that we wear helmets as well because we fall off horses a lot. But other than that, it's being able to come together and being able to cooperate on a cause. And even as far as the Olympic Games themselves are concerned, a huge part of the operations of the Olympic Games, wherein we have to be concerned about sustainability and efficiency, is moving athletes and officials and spectators around from place to place. The people involved in the Olympic movement, we push for being able to have the human interaction, to be able to compete physically against each other, to build relationships through that. So we all know that mobility is so important. It's part of daily life. Motorsports takes it to a different level. But just to be concerned about being able to get to point A and point B and being able to do our work, we take it for granted so much. But it's really a part of us being able to do what we need to do. We are placed where we are, and we do what we can where we are. And that all just becomes a part of it. And I think that's how important the relationship is between the FIA and the IOC, especially that in the coming Youth Olympic Games in Buenos Aires, the FIA will be able to educate the young athletes on the importance of road safety.
Okay, Mikey, thank you very much. Graham, obviously you've been responsible, as we've been hearing, for advocating a number of social responsibility initiatives at the FIA, including young people, STEM education, women in motorsport, obviously, sustainability and disability in motorsport. You've achieved, obviously, quite a lot, clearly. What are you working on at the moment? What's next?
It's interesting, isn't it? We talked about this in Turin, and it's now a fundamental part of the FIA, which I think is superb. And what's behind it, as Mikey knows, is the recognition that sport is an engine for social change. Actually can change society. Just want to give you an indication of the breadth of this subject, though, by focusing on one matter. 10 years ago, 2008, WRC, Rally Ireland, won a prestigious award from the Peace Through Sport Institute in Monaco because they ran a rally across divided Ireland, north to south, and they started the event, and I was there when they flagged them off, in Enniskillen, where the bomb went off, which killed many, many people. At the time, through my ASN, there was a little bit of a puzzlement about peace through sport. But now that's developed. The IOC have embraced this. The United Nations had a debate, and within the context of their 2030 programs, they recognized that sport can contribute to peace and development. And that's now, I think, another area of social responsibility we want to have a look at. And, of course, we are uniquely, in our global reach, in a position where we can influence and be supportive. And I think there's one very good example, which is throughout grant programs at the moment. In war-torn Syria, we are keeping motorsport going, and through keeping motorsport going, keeping some normality in society in that country. And Hanny's here just to tell us a little bit about it.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. So thank you for having me, and I will just give you a brief of the situation of the Syrian Automobile Club and our circuit project that we had previously. This circuit has been the dream of the founders of the club since 1950. So it never saw the light until 2006, when we were able to buy a land near Damascus in a very beautiful village called Saidnaya, This is a very famous place where we have some of the oldest churches in the world in Sednaya. So we bought the land, we started the work in 2006, and then later on in 2008 we were able to have our first track in Syria, which is not homologated, but according to grade B CIK specifications. And the plan was to have a social club and a karting and other activities on this circuit. 2008, we started our first race on the track, and after that we had many events running in this circuit, like road safety events for children and other activities like training our marshals and other extrication and firefighting trainings. So you can see here we have a rollover machine, we have some training for our officials on firefighting, and we have an extrication trainer also in the circuit. 2010, we were honored by the visit of Mr. Todd, and he also tried one of our training race car. And then, unfortunately, as you all know, in 2011, the sad situation started in Syria, where we were not able to do anything. Most of the activities had stopped in the country, and we were not able to get to our circuit anymore because the area was not safe. So we had two choices: either to stop, do nothing, or to try to find a solution and keep on living in general. So we decided that we need to do something. With the help and support of the FIA, we received few grants where we sent about 58 officials to be trained by the MSA in Lebanon. And in 2013, we sent over 30 drivers, competitors, to Jordan also to be trained by the MSA to keep things moving. During that period, we also were involved in many social responsibility activities like road safety activities. We were able to do some fundraising to buy wheelchairs. We were able to buy about 165 wheelchairs and distribute it to people affected by the war, and also to do other activities like distributing clothes and other things. Then at the end of 2014, we were able to go back to our circuit where we saw this. Of course, it was almost destroyed, robbed, and nothing was functioning. At the first moment, we thought that we cannot do anything. There is nothing to be done. Then a few days later, our club president decided to call us all and say, no, we have to do something. And with the support of the FIA grants, we were able to do some work, repair many of the areas in the circuit. And in 2015, we started to do more races on the track. And you can see that we built the race control, we bought timing equipment, and we also built some of the storages in the track. In another project, since we were not able to get any support from the government, like ambulances and firefighters, we were able to get a truck, an ambulance truck, donated from another NGO. And with a grant from the FIA, we rebuilt this truck. We installed all of the necessary equipment to have a fully operated ICU, which we use in our events and in other events in the country. Later on in 2017, another grant was given to us, so we bought used cars from another circuit that is not functioning anymore. We bought the cars and the spare parts, and now we are working on establishing the Arrive and Drive karting project. For the future, what we still need to have lighting, because due to the weather in Syria, most of the activities are done at night. So this is the 2018 grant, hopefully, that should be done by the end of this year to have a solar power lighting system on the track. Other activities, we do many of road safety activities. You can see we have a full program of road safety with kids. In schools, we go to schools, we give 3 special programs to different age categories of children. I will just show you a small video of one of the latest drift events that we had in our circuit. At the end, I just want to say thank you for the FIA president and deputies and all the team for not turning head away from a club that is passing through a difficult time. On the contrary, we were supported financially, morally, and we got all the support that we needed to keep on going and preserve motorsport in Syria. Thank you very much.
Hani, that's an amazing story of resilience and persistence. Just give me, what is the makeup of the audience? I mean, when you've got race events going on, you've got Christians, Muslims all together. I mean, tell us about how that all works.
Yes, of course. When you go to see a race, you know, everybody is there. Everybody is concentrating on what the race is consisted of. As I said, it's a Christian village, actually, that we have our track in. It's very famous. And so many people, we don't know who's Christian and not, but everybody is there.
Fantastic.
So no politics, it's only sport, only people enjoying the moment.
Great. Thank you very much, Hani.
Thank you.
Graham, your thoughts about that?
Well, you don't turn your back, do you? You know, we're non-political, we're sport, we should help. And I think it's a great example of peace through sport.
So just summing up then, how much can motorsport as a global force for good? What's possible? How much can it help?
I think it can help an enormous amount. It helps, as you can see, with conflict and social responsibilities. With disabled people, I think it helps bring something different to the focus. And I think that that's a really important thing that we should embrace. You know, motorsport to quite a lot of people seems like an extreme sport, and maybe on the people that aren't involved view it as the more dangerous end of the scale when it comes to sports that pose risks. But for me, it's my normal, and for a lot of disabled people, it's the opportunity to feel that normality.
Mikey?
I think for anyone who has had the experience as an athlete, all you need to do is look into yourself and see how the experience of being an athlete molds somebody and takes them to a direction in their life where they're actually in a position to give back. And as a parent, I would love for my kids to be involved and committed to sports just to see you know, what their best is, to be able to challenge yourself to be the best that you can be regardless of any kind of situation, and to be able to make friends, to learn how to respect, to learn how to play fair. To some people, it's play, but later on in life, you realize the values that you learn from being involved in sport, and then you have to think to yourself, how then can I use something that's really fun to be able to make the world a better place, even in just, you know, small ways at a time, starting with yourself. So to be able to bring sport to more people and have people enjoy it and get the values out of it, I think is the most important part of being involved in sports.
Final word to you, Graham.
I think we are almost uniquely placed, able-bodied, disabled, men and women, global reach. And I think harnessing this, we can be a real force for social change. Exciting.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much to all of you. What a fantastic and frankly very moving end to this final plenary session. So first of all, thank you, and let's clear the stage, ready for our closing speeches and our video.
Thank you, Natalie, Mikey, and Graham.
Thank you.